C'est donc la personne idoine à qui je vais demander, dans la mesure du possible, de nous présenter en fait la situation de la thématique en question, à savoir l'énergie en Afrique, comment équilibrer indépendance, efficacité, accessibilité et surtout croissance économique. Alors, Aménie, je vous en prie.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Benamou, mais permettez-moi tout d'abord de remercier Amadeus pour me ramener à Rabat pour la première fois depuis déjà 2013. Donc, je reviens presque chez moi. Donc, merci encore une fois pour cela. En ce qui concerne la thématique qui est extrêmement importante, comme vous le savez bien, l'Afrique, c'est un continent de plus de 50 pays qui est extrêmement riche en termes de ressources et d'énergie, que ce soit des ressources renouvelables ou non renouvelables, aussi très riche par sa population qui est pour la plupart une population jeune. Cependant, l'Afrique souffre d'une pauvreté énergétique extrêmement sévère. Plus que la moitié de notre continent n'a pas d'accès à l'électricité et 90% de notre population n'a pas d'accès au mode de cuisson propre, ce qui nous coûte non seulement des vies de centaines de milliers de personnes, mais aussi ça nous coûte presque 5% de notre PIB qu'on perd.
Excellencies,
Notre secteur
distinguished guests,
extrêmement
esteemed panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to this high-level panel at the Global Growth Conference here in Rabat. It is a privilege for me to be with you and to moderate a conversation that touches the core of Africa's development agenda. Infrastructure is the backbone of economic transformation. Without modern roads, energy systems, digital networks, water access, and resilient urban centers, sustainable development simply cannot take root. Yet, the infrastructure financing gap in Africa remains very vast. Closing this gap will require more than public budgets and traditional aid. It will require creativity in financing, stronger institutional frameworks, and a renewed spirit of partnership between the public and private sectors. Today's theme captures that reality, but also the opportunity it presents. Innovative financing solutions alongside well-structured public-private partnerships are not optional. They are essential tools to accelerate investments, de-risk capital flows, and ensure that infrastructure serves not only economic growth, but also environmental sustainability and social resilience. This panel brings together visionary leaders and practitioners from governments, finance, industry, and multilateral institutions who are at the forefront of this agenda, shaping policy, designing financial instruments, and implementing transformative projects across the continents. Together, we will explore how to unlock greater private investments, enhance public sector capacity, and build a pipeline of bankable, future-proof infrastructure projects. As moderator, I look forward to facilitating a conversation that I hope will be rich in insights, but also focused on action. Thank you for your presence and your commitment to Africa's transformation. Let us begin. I would like to begin with you, Mrs. Eran Oshem. You are the founder and CEO of Africa Women Innovation and Entrepreneurship Forum from Nigeria. I remind everyone that it is an award-winning and pan-African organization dedicated to fostering women's economic inclusion and empowerment. Irene, you are also an expert and specialist in entrepreneurship, trade, and innovation, with more than 30 years of experience in international development, enterprise development, and private sector growth. You are a passionate champion and advocate of women and youth entrepreneurship, and you have worked, and I think it's the best part, with people at many and very different levels, from startups to entrepreneurs, to multinational companies, governments, industry associations, donor agencies, PPPs and development partners. My first question to you is, how can we ensure that the benefits of projects financed by PPPs are distributed and delivered a positive impact on society?
Cette vision d'ensemble, alors la problématique, ne serait-ce que d'accès à
Thank you very much. I think first of all, I would start with saying that the financing deficit, for infrastructure on the African continent is simply too huge.
La proportion de la population mondiale qui n'a pas accès à l'électricité se trouve en Afrique.
Alors, si on compte la croissance démographique, how do you ensure that this is distributed and delivered and it makes positive impact on society? I think the first thing is that we need to be intentional from the design phase and from the planning phase. We need to engage communities and stakeholders early in the planning phases, understanding because if you engage communities who understand and own the initiatives, the projects, then there is more, there is a stronger impact and sustainability. So the first is engaging communities, in planning. I think this is very critical. Then the next thing is transparency in contracts and in procurement. When you have transparency and also in distribution of the benefits, then there is trust, and there is less risk, you reduce risk. Another point that I can make is that we go beyond just building infrastructure. We need to integrate social and environmental safeguards,
Thank you very much.
local hire, local content. For example, in Nigeria, this was very critical in creating access in the oil and gas. There is driving local content. This is very, very important. And then, of course, protecting the environment and supporting small businesses. By my career, like you have mentioned, I drive women entrepreneurship on the continent. And this means when you talk women entrepreneurship, you talk about small businesses. You talk about a huge gap in opportunities, in access. You talk about rural women. Most of the women are based in rural. And what are these sectors? For example, where we have infrastructure, it starts with agriculture, where you have a lot of women. It's energy, it's transport and logistics, it's in everything, it's in education, it's in health. And in all these sectors, women are the most affected, the most marginalized. So it's important to engage them, to include them, to have more inclusion. And across sectors, they are affected, they are marginalized, there is a huge gap. So that is one point, so going beyond infrastructure and integrating social and environmental safeguards in everything that we do. As my organization too, like I said, I advocate women's inclusion, women's economic empowerment, how do we support women to start and to build sustainable and profitable businesses. And for me, therefore, it is very, very critical. It's very, very important, to why we are driving infrastructure and financing of infrastructure, to think about closing the gender gaps in all of that.
In gas inputs, for example.
Thank you very much for highlighting also the importance of including communities, not just as an imperative, but also as a stake and interest for any project to work, because these are those who are concerned and sometimes those who know the relevant approach to the problems. I would like to give the opportunity to Mrs. Lena Sen, President and CEO of the Investment Advisory Group, Developing Capital for Africa, based in Dakar, Republic of Senegal, with over 15 years of finance experience in the US and in Africa, and you have an expertise in overall business development and Africa investment strategy, and you are also one of the 100 most influential women in Africa in 2025. My first question is to enable us to deepen our understanding of the importance and role of the PPPs, but also how to make sure that the PPPs are well structured and viable. You have the opportunity to work and study both sides, the private and the public sides. How can you define their complementary and different roles, but also the challenges that we really have in making sure there is balance and win-win for that structure?
We come with open eyes, we will be relying on our partners, but we see potential.
So for the conference,
thank you. As we brainstorm the topic, we noticed this sur la base de l'expérience marocaine. On sait que l'électrification rurale a eu aussi une dimension paradoxale, c'est-à-dire que des populations qui n'avaient pas accès à l'électricité étaient plus actives, professionnellement parlant, sur les champs, et l'accès à l'électricité, en fait, a induit un accroissement, qu'on le veuille ou pas, de la pauvreté, parce que il y avait moins de productivité au niveau des activités. Donc, puisqu'on est en train de penser à des modèles fonctionnels par rapport à l'accès à l'électricité et de quelle manière on pourrait mettre en levier les ressources au niveau du continent, j'aimerais demander à Shahid Jarmouni de de BB Energy, quels sont les modèles, vous qui avez eu une expérience par exemple avec de grands groupes miniers, quels sont des modèles qui pourraient être développés dans ce cadre-là pour justement utiliser la disponibilité de la ressource et générer une chaîne de valeur locale et bien entendu apporter de l'accès à l'électricité.
Merci, M. Benhamoud. Je pense que on est tous d'accord ici que l'électricité, en tout cas l'énergie, est à la base du développement économique de toute économie, je dirais, normalement constituée. Alors l'Afrique, on a tendance à en parler comme un ensemble unique, uni. C'est quand même plus de 50 pays et chacun avec ses propres challenges et opportunités et ressources, etc. Il y a les opportunités qu'on voit, qu'on a mises en œuvre, qu'on a appliquées, tournent autour de deux choses. La première, c'est la régionalisation de l'énergie. Donc il y a des hubs, il y a des clusters d'énergie qu'on trouve sur tous les types d'énergie, que ce soit l'énergie fossile, comme les hubs en Afrique de l'Ouest, en Afrique de l'Est par exemple, ou alors l'énergie électrique. Il y a des connexions. Ces connexions sont malheureusement sous-dimensionnées par rapport au potentiel de ces pays. Je prends l'exemple, par exemple, du Congo-Brazzaville, qui a énormément de capacité électrique, mais qui est très peu connecté aux pays voisins qui, eux, sont en demande d'électricité. Donc, il y a clairement des investissements, des opportunités d'investissement à faire sur tout ce qui est transmission entre ces pays, chose que nous regardons et que d'autres groupes regardent. Donc, on peut avoir des pays, typiquement le Congo-Brazzaville, qui est exportateur de pétrole et de gaz, qui peuvent également devenir exportateurs d'électricité.
Thank you very much. This is really a critical point, and I hope all the people involved in the public sector will also rely on experts such as yourself in order really to make sure that the environment and the policy are aligned with private sector needs to de-risk investments and to make sure we optimize this opportunity.
De cuivre ou de cobalt et laisser d'autres pays, je dirais, récupérer la valeur ajoutée parce qu'ils ont pas nécessairement de savoir-faire en plus, mais de l'électricité bon marché. Alors, le Congo, la République démocratique du Congo est un exemple intéressant.
Michel Ron, you are the Chief International Officer of SAC from the Italian Republic. You are overseeing the company's overseas network with 15 offices globally. And prior to that, you also served as the elected president of the Bern Union, the Global Association of Export Credits and Investment Insurers. Also, you were vice chairman of the board of directors of the African Trade Insurance Assurance Agency and also First Secretary General of the International Working Group, which is a multilateral initiative between OECD and non-OECD countries focused on establishing common rules for official export credit support. We are very happy to have you here because you will give us also a concrete case and a practical case with the company you are representing. You recently opened an office here in Rabat, which I think is a good example of this dynamic. Could you please share with us the work your company, which is an extension of the Italian government, is conducting to support projects in Morocco involving Italian companies, and how also you collaborate and support local companies in North and West Africa in general, specifically what type of financial tools you offer them in the infrastructure sector?
Thank you very much for having me here, and it's really an honor also to be on a panel that is almost gender balanced, almost. So it's so far very balanced, but you know, we have a lot of still debates in Italy about the manels, the men-only panels, and this is really refreshing. So yes, I'm really pleased to be here because this is also, as a city, you know, the location of the most recent opening we have made. We have our colleagues from Rabat here present, and beyond just looking at Morocco, they are extending as a hub. The outreach goes to all of North Africa and Western Africa, but we do have another office for over 10 years in Cairo, in Egypt, and another one in Johannesburg. So we are very keen, and maybe more than ever right now in Italy, there is a political focus on Africa with a list of priority countries. There are 16 of them, and this is at the top of the agenda. Also, we're really happy to effectively very much an integral part of it. Now, what do? We're an export credit agency and a financial institution, 100% owned by the Ministry of Finance of Italy. However, we are a joint stock company, so we have our own, if you want, balance sheet. We have to make profits, we have to be profitable. We receive no funds from the Treasury. On the contrary, we pay dividends to our stakeholder. And in addition, our role, our effective role, is to support Italian companies. We do it both domestically, but above all, what we are known for, but effectively we're doing both roles, is for the export side. So we assist, facilitate Italian companies that wish to internationalize, to invest, and to export to what we consider are the most promising export markets. We certainly see Morocco as one of them. Right now, it's one of our gate countries. It's a strategic, important country for Italy. Now, how do we do it? We are not a bank. We're not lenders. We're not a direct lender. We are an export credit guarantor. So we need the banks to come with us, and they do, as long as we continue providing the right products. And just to give you an idea of the dimensions of the company and the size of the finance that we provide, only last year, we'll take just 2024 as one of as a showcase. We supported over 60,000 Italian companies. Many of them, as per the description you made, are actually very small to medium size SMEs. And 60,000 Italian companies were supported by 60 billion euro of new guarantee commitments just in one single year, of which just more than half, 35 billion euro, went towards the export side. The rest was in the domestic market. And the whole stock, if you want, our portfolio for last year, just in terms of overseas projects, amounts to 100 billion of insured operations. So these are operations we insure, we guarantee investments abroad, and we're very much now focusing on Africa, especially North, I would say North and West Africa. And the transparency of procurement is very close to the heart. And the reason being is you asked me about what products, and I won't go into technical descriptions, but the one very innovative product of ours is actually more similar to untied finance.
There is a geopolitical battle.
So it's not, if you want, directly correlated to any one commercial contract, but rather we actually here work not so much on the Italian exporter side, we work on the foreign buyers side, so we choose the best in each country. And we listen to what their real needs are. What are the capex plans? What type of innovation, technology, machinery and equipment they require? Infrastructure is huge for us, but not only, but infrastructure means access to water as well as transportation, reliable constructions that we call at times also social construction. It could even be in reference to the rehabilitation of the earthquake, if you want damage done. And what we do is effectively we support these companies by bringing the local companies, and they could be public sector and they could be private sector. We work with both. In Africa, in fact, the last couple of years, we worked with ministries of finance in several countries, such as Benin, such as Côte d'Ivoire, such as Senegal.
I think we are going to see some regression.
We're working here right now, but we're still, negotiating. And I think that there is plenty to do. These could be in the agricultural sector, they could be in green energy, and there is a lot of it happening in Africa. And we're just going to make sure that they really transparent and the best investments find a good match through the high-level technology that Italian exporters represent. I can thereafter, come into maybe later to some very specific examples. I can just end by saying that tomorrow we're signing a major I'm not allowed to reveal the name, but it's the top Moroccan conglomerate that we are going to provide this untied but not exactly facilities called the push strategy, because we're pushing our countries, we're pushing our exporters towards the best possible export countries. And tomorrow we will sign in Morocco with the top industrial company a push facility amounting $365 million. So watch this space. I'm not allowed for breach of confidentiality, but tomorrow it will be in the media. Thanks.
Congratulations on that, and also on every work, every project you have launched in Morocco and in the region. Thank you also for providing us with some of the technical instruments and approach you are implementing, which seems very sustainable and also very deep-rooted in the context where you are working. So we would like to congratulate you on that and wish you, of course, the best for continuation. So I would like to give the floor to our male panelists to make it balanced. So, Mr. Innocent Isishai, you are the CEO of ACO Associates and former director of the Corporate Council on Africa in the United States of America. You are a seasoned professional in governmental affairs and public policy, high committed to public service and policy development in Nigeria. You also hold the position of Vice President of the Harvard Kennedy School Alumni Association in Nigeria, which really tries to foster governance excellence in the country. And you are a strong policy advocate and driving reforms in the payments and remittance ecosystem. And that is exactly what I would like to focus on in my question. Nigeria has made significant progress in digital payments. In scaling digital payments, how can now Nigeria further enhance the role of the Nigeria Interbank Settlement System and other digital payment platforms to achieve broader interoperability and financial inclusion and reduce transaction costs, because that is the level of achievements where many countries find difficulties.
Thank you very much. I want to extend my sincere gratitude for the kind invitation. The topic you mentioned, the question you have is a very salient one. Given the work that we do, one of the key things we try to do is really working with policymakers working with practitioners, providing a forum where they could all convene to work on key initiatives that could help to drive, greater skill when it comes to payment. Because of the topic which you talk about, which is really around public-private partnership, in the case of Nigeria, what you saw was the coming together of the banks, the regulatory authorities, the government, in setting up an interoperable framework that allowed different participants to play, to integrate into a central switch, which is like what you see today in India with PPI, which has really helped accelerate
que la Banque africaine de développement, sous l'égide politique de l'Union, de la Commission de l'Union africaine, avec la Banque mondiale, avec le système d'énergie forum, avec Rockefeller et récemment avec la Commission de l'Union européenne, ont mis en place une initiative qui va être vraiment transformatrice. Et gardez bien ce mot en tête pour les prochaines années, c'est M300, c'est mission 300. 300 c'est quoi? C'est donner l'accès à l'électricité pour 300 millions d'Africains d'ici 2030. C'est là M300, c'est un chiffre important, c'est un objectif important, mais on a abordé ça de façon très concrète, c'est-à-dire on est venu sur les pays qui ont les plus faibles taux d'accès à l'électricité en mettant en place ce qu'on appelle des compacts, en disant aux autorités en place, vous êtes dans cette situation-là et vous voulez atteindre cet objectif. Qu'est-ce qu'il faut? Donc en termes de comment attirer l'investissement privé, comment mobiliser l'investissement public,
enhancing domestic payments infrastructure, but the key thing which we have seen with the major challenge and which we engage with some of our partners and the regulators is really around cross-border, because there are huge costs to it. Even coming here to Morocco today, I had to use my foreign card rather than my domestic card just to make sure that the payments could actually go. And so what you're seeing is that the average cost of transactions is roughly between 8 to 12%. It's relatively high when you look at it as a whole. So that deters trade in itself. So what we advocate for is to see how you can have greater regulatory harmonization, like what you have in Europe, where you have like what we call the Payment System Directive 2, PSD2, which allows companies to, or payment companies, financial institutions to scale across borders, because they already have a framework, and that has really helped to enable companies to scale, as opposed to a situation whereby one company has to work to accommodate itself with maybe 15 different regulations, which is quite expensive. So what the barriers for scaling is much higher for firms based in Africa, relative to firms based in Europe. So what we're seeing now is, and what we're advocating for, is greater harmonization around the rules to make it easier for companies to scale, because some of the companies work with, that's a major difficulty, and compliance costs are very high. And so we're beginning to see some efforts in that direction, where we're seeing, like, really from a regional perspective, we've seen PAPS, but PAPS has had some issues in scaling, but we're seeing more from, like, within the Comesa region, where getting the payment system to talk to each other, to enable greater cross-border payments across within Comesa, and we're also seeing that in the SADC region as well. So what we try to advocate for is to see more of this approach, more engagements with different parties, more engagement across regulatory agencies to begin to harmonize on the rules, which will make it easier for companies to scale, as well as making sure they're in compliance with rules around AML, anti-money laundering,
tout à l'heure, au fur et à mesure qu'on agrandit les réseaux, on a des perspectives. Donc si je suis un producteur d'électricité du secteur privé, je dois m'assurer que demain l'énergie que je vais produire, l'électricité que je vais produire, j'ai en face un réseau qui est capable de l'assumer et qu'on ne puisse pas tomber dans des situations de blackout comme on a vu.
Thank you very much. I think you're touching up on something we have discussed about what kind of public governance reforms need to be done, and the issue of harmonization is very important in terms of regulatory procedures. And I think we will get back to that later on, maybe with the audience when we open the debate. Thank you once again. I would like to give the opportunity to Mr. Koray Erdemli, the CEO and Chairman of Erdemli Group and Erdemli Holding from the Federal Republic of Germany. You are a member of the European Union Finance Forum, specializing in global investments, focusing on energy, project development and implementation. You are dual national of Germany and Turkey, and a senior economist, accomplished entrepreneur with over 35 years of experience in finance, fund management and investment. You are, and I think many people, I met some businessmen also who confirmed, a prominent figure in the business community. You have cultivated strong relationships with governments and authorities across Europe, Asia and Africa. Please could you also give us your remarks and perspective on that question?
Of April, we have something very strange.
Thank you very much for your introduction and interesting comments of the participants. I am honored to be part of this prestigious panel at the Global Growth Conference. First of all, I would like to express my thanks to all those who have contributed to the success of this forum. Before I go into my elaborated points, I would like to briefly discuss our current world economic events and explain the connections. Due to my work, not only as an entrepreneur, but also as an economist with a focus on economic sociology, I will explain a different angle today. We are in a time when the political, commercial, and economic wars between the centers of power are intensifying. There are major changes in the internal order of the countries and in the world order. I think that all technologies countries are currently at an economic decision point, and some of them are very close to a recession. The crisis began in the 1930s, and the last recession occurred in 2008. History repeats itself again and again. If you look at the depth of the countries, the rise of power, which puts the exciting power to the test, then these factors, this change in order and systems are very destructive. The way they are handled could lead to something far worse than a recession. Not only are the current crises unresolved, we wake up every day with new tensions. Against this background, public-private partnership or cooperation are becoming increasingly important. One of the important factors in public-private partnership is that based on an in-depth examination of this type of partnership. It can be decided that the partnership does not harm the competitive environment. My recent business trips 2 weeks ago to the USA and especially last week in the Cape Verde, and the meeting there with many ministers have shown me that the PPP trend is confirmed, especially in the African continent. I will not go into the definition of PPP. We all here know how SAC operates model and PPPs work. In a time of great uncertainty, public-private partnerships are indispensable and of critical importance. For this, I have worked out for decisive key points as a problem and solution presentation. Key point number 1, PPPs is as complementary corporations. The problem, if complementary corporations can free up the infrastructure for transformative growth, I personally call this intelligent capital.
And also you have
the solution. Complementary corporations always lead to progress and are always of mutual benefit.
In Europe,
this can be called public-private partnership, private equity, or fund investment
all the tools
if the cooperation is complemented.
A very nice energy system in Africa. But
key point 2, creativity and innovation.
Now
the problem,
we are in a world
production
that
sites and companies with a long tradition of creativity and innovation are reducing their expectations for the full year, pointing to the economic uncertainty that results from global trade policy. The solution, in view of the consolidation tendencies in the sectors, the importance of public-private partnership is also becoming clear. Such partnership enhance the growth of foreign investment and open up new market segments. Key point number 3. PPPs and innovative resource mobilization. The problem. The world is now on the eve of a great transformation. The rules of world trade are changing radically, especially through tariffs. No one can predict where the technologies of artificial intelligence will lead. In this context, public-private partnership and the mobilization of innovative resources are of great importance. The solution PPPs are considered the most important step in increasing the growth potential of public-private partnership and attracting foreign investment. That is why I see it as part of the strategic growth goals, especially in the domestic market. Key point for me, the year of the business carnival. The problem, when we look at the developments in the world, we recognize this fact. This technology is only one step away from a great disaster. Everything changes quickly and fear is in the air. There is no resources why 500 million Europeans could not defend themselves against the US, Russia, and China alone. In the same way, there is no reasons why 1.5 billion Africans could not defend themselves against this rest of the world alone. The solution, with this change PPPs in the context of public-private partnership open up a historic time window of possibilities. In short, we are looking for future-oriented visionaries and thinkers. This is the only way to access public partnership.
The problem
result now, the last one. Sometimes we see the problem on one side and the solution on the other. We often break at this balancing act, although it is not really far away from us.
That cannot be the
Most
way
investors understand the problem.
I mean, if we talk about energy
with PPPs,
security,
the ability to free up the infrastructure for transformative growth, not just temporarily, but permanently and without destroying it, is the most accurate summary of complementary collaboration. PPPs have the potential to strengthen technology and infrastructure and increase operational capacity. In addition, the financial and strategic support provided by PPPs enable individual sectors to expand and increase their market share. Public-private partnership could open the door to a new era in the trading market with the increase in foreign investment and strategic partnership. The competitive dynamics of the sectors could be
from everywhere. We're not making every partner comes with specific strengths and weaknesses as well. Calling upon them to manufacture locally.
Thank you very much for this very enlightening and disruptive positioning, and also for being solution-oriented in your
human resources.
I would like to ask a question to Mr. Antonio Enrique da Silva, founder and managing director of Invest A Thompson SA Business Partners Group, but also former chairman of board Apex from the Republic of Angola. You are a dedicated serial entrepreneur with a relevant passion and an accomplished senior-level executive with over 26 years of track record in a variety of sectors: oil and gas, telecom, broadcasting, manufacturing, and construction. You served both locally in your home country, Angola, but also internationally as top management executive professional or on board of directors. So my question is for you to bring us the private sector's point of view. So from the private sector's standing, what are the top 3 signals or actions that give confidence to invest in long-term infrastructure projects in Africa?
In Egypt and other parts of the continent, but also with all the love that I have for Morocco
thank you very much for your question.
We have to also look at, at our continent.
We face multiple
many good examples exist in the continent.
And those challenges are related first
you spoke about
the fact that we still have
rural development since 2009. I mean, evolved a lot.
That there's a lot of space
thanks to the nexus, digital energy.
Bring
now we have mini grid and off-grid. That is an
but also
examples are happening in
regard
Kenya, for
to
instance.
those
So we
same
also
challenges,
can learn from from
create
other
a
African
space where
countries. Let's
it's
not,
possible
think
to
that
ensure
knowledge
that
is only
investors, when they
concentrated in
come
one
in,
or two or
they are
three
able
countries.
to be
So we have also
both from
to
a
have
legal
this humility
perspective
and see
secure
that
that the investments are
there are
going to
new technologies, there is
be
innovation,
managed just
and
like
with the
elsewhere
AI,
where they were
especially when
used
it comes to
put
energy
their money
efficiency,
in.
there's a
Therefore,
new
we
world
need
that's
to
opening
create
for us as well.
the
The
space
African
where
Union
there is a
led
relation between
the
government
continent on two things,
policy,
and I have been privileged
public
to
sector
lead on these two things.
intervention,
One, a
private sector
continent-wide
intervention, and
AI
also
strategy
the overall
that
stakeholders
was
that
approved
are
in July
a
last
specific
year,
geography, because
and
we are
the
doing
energy
this
efficiency
on the
strategy
well-being
in
of the people.
addition
We
to the
want to
many
develop
other
communities,
programs
and
that
we
we're
want to
having.
bring
So
and
let
ensure
us just
sustainability
look at the
across the
matter
years.
comprehensively,
So the private
look
sector
at
is
demand,
key
look at
because
supply,
it's an
and
element
make sure
that
we
represents the
manipulate
majority. We
and
cannot just
ensure
rely
that we
on
take the best
public
out of
sector
all
or
partners.
on
And please let us just not say,
especially
oh,
when
this is
we know
China, this
that
is
there's
Europe, this is
limited,
US. Everyone comes with a
amounts of,
positive
let's say,
and maybe
finance
some things to be desired.
for the projects that we want to
it's
have
not,
in place, and therefore the contribution of the private sector and
really,
investors is key.
So
having said that, I believe that
how can the
as we
African
see
Union
good examples of
build clusters,
interactions
ecosystems
between
on a regional
the private
basis?
and the
What
private
kind of
sectors,
tools
we can
be
even
used
copy and paste,
to
because
precisely
African realities are very
the
similar,
projects
and
are
challenges and
regional in
developments
each and
that
every
we share
sector,
are also
specifically in
very
energy,
similar.
whether they are
So instead
transmission,
of
whether they are
committing the same
what the
errors,
African
we
Union
can
does
learn
is
from
only
those
the
that have
regional aspect.
managed
National programs continue as it is.
succeed,
And I must say,
out of those
you spoke
lessons
about
that we
multilateral.
learn
I
to
must
avoid the same mistakes so
also
that we are
value
able
the
to
role of the African
leapfrog.
Development Bank
And one
in
of the
that
good
sense.
things that
African
we
Development
can
Bank
consider
has been the
today is
implementing,
fact
the
that
first
we have
implementer of
so-called
regional
artificial
projects in the
intelligence. It's not
continent,
a substitute
promoting
to
regional
what,
integration and especially
human intelligence can do. But
in transmission.
It's
Even
a
the
tool
Spain
that can
Morocco
help
has
us
been
to
funded in part
achieve
by also by the
results
African
much
Development
faster.
Bank in
The same way
addition to
we did
EID and other
with
partners.
the
So
use
our
of
actors,
telecom.
be
I
they
used to
political,
work for
African
10 years
Union, or
in the
financier
telecom
as the
industry
African
with
Development
the
a lot,
Green
and we
Tool,
many, I think we owe
managed
them
to
a lot,
bring
and we all
together and
must
be
greet
more
them in
inclusive
this forum.
with
Thank you.
access to the telecom side. So, in a nutshell, I think that innovation is permanent, and we need to adjust ourselves to every momentum. They say 10 years ago, we didn't speak about artificial intelligence, and now that we are living a post-COVID era, we also learn from the COVID era because of the video conferences and all those tools. So we are going and learning much faster.
Places like in Spain
and
now,
have the
we have
responsibility,
plenty
share
of
responsibility
renewable
to bring results
generation,
much faster
but
to those in need. And
we
Africa is an
didn't
example
plan
of both
the
the potential,
development of this
challenge,
generation
and opportunities
thinking
to
about
grow,
the
and
demand.
the demographic factor
So,
is in our
one thing
favor,
that
so
we
need
have
really
learned is that
to do things
if
fast
you are
and
able to
in the best
develop
way we
from
can
the
do.
beginning, from scratch, your system, please
for ending on this very mobilizing and
now we have
enthusiastic
digitalization,
position,
we have
because the potential
many
is there,
technologies
and
that allow us
the smart
to
solutions are
introduce
also there,
demand
and
response.
we just need more
Because
synergies,
with
but also
demand response, you are able
better
to
built
move
framework
the consumption
to
of
ensure
some,
that
of some
there is gain
customers.
for all
I know that in
stakeholders.
Africa, the first point is
I'm
to
happy
have
to see that the
generation, of
room
course,
is actually full.
if you invest
It was
in grids,
empty, and slowly I see that it's full. I would like to ask the panelists, do you have specific ideas you would like or insights you would like to add before we open the floor, or could we open the dialogue already?
With less investment in grids. So
this is a side comment that is not at all related to even not the information I prepared, because I was listening carefully to some of the comments made by the panelists on the PPPs, which we have done quite a few, but I'm not a big fan, and I want to explain why. We often find that what we call blended finance, when you have a mixture, you know, and in Italian there is an expression, it's neither fish nor meat, because you tend to mix together elements of finance that don't really work together very well, and I thought I'll put it on the table. When you ask for government-to-government type finance, or even more bluntly, concessionary finance, and then you add to it a facility that is, you know, according to the market logic, and it could be OECD rules, which is what all export credit agencies have to abide by, then it's not going to work really. And what we see, especially in Africa, is that many countries are still insisting on concessionary finance. But it is really time to move on, especially, you know, with such good companies around that you were mentioning also in Nigeria. So much advanced technology today, so much, you know, effectively a transformation has already taken place, that there is no need to constantly ask for concessionary finance. And, you know, I would really recommend that governments, and we're seeing it happening now in many countries, in Morocco for sure, but also in even countries such as Tanzania, such as Côte d'Ivoire. There's less and less, if you want, resistance now to starting to work with the financial, the international markets on market terms. It has to be bankable, it has to be commercially viable, but also attractive to, you know, to investors from overseas, because this is really what we're looking at. As long as, you know, it goes back to saying, oh, well, you have to reduce your price to concessionary. I don't believe any country, and this applies to Europe as well as Latin America, no country wants to be seen as a donor-based economy. And I don't think today it is the best technique available on the market.
Huge demand requirements. I mean, it's going to triple perhaps by 2050, the demand in Africa.
I just wanted to
Therefore, we need whatever resources available, because there's a huge poverty, energy poverty issue that we need to address. Rather than addressing to the European, American, or whatever blueprint, I think it has to be homegrown African solutions, with support, of course, coming from other countries. What is lacking in Africa, in my opinion, I think we talk about this for ages, it hasn't changed much. It's not about the resource availability, it's the lack of governance, it's the lack of infrastructure, it's the lack of finance and lack of visionary leaders and regional integration.
But
how come it's going to happen like between Spain, Portugal, France and Morocco, when there was a blackout, all these four countries worked together?
People will
Whether
suffer,
in Africa,
but it
political
will push
problems,
governments to take initiative,
border problems will be
just
resolved
sitting
so that
back
countries
and
can
waiting
work
for
together.
people to
We
give
can have a
them
united,
funds
interconnected Greece.
in order to function.
Definitely. With that,
Now,
if I may,
governments have no
Mehmet, I'd like to
choice
open the floor.
but to look
Alors
for
nous avons
partners, look for new, private
des
sector
questions
in
de
different
l'audience.
countries, look
Si vous
for
voulez
new
bien
partnerships with
commencer,
other
on va attendre
governments.
qu'un micro
But
vous soit
I think it's right now
apporté.
things have
Ça vient.
really changed, and I want to say thank you.
Alors le
Trump,
premier
for
rang,
that.
s'il vous plaît, devant.
And it also reminds us the importance of leadership. I'm not talking about the Trump case, but also the African governments. We really need bold leaders, people who are strong believers in Africans' potential and strong believers in investing in Africa by Africa. And that's, without that vision, I don't think many would have the courage to work deep, as you said. But thank you so much for opening that window. Yes, and then we will open the floor for the audience.
And my question goes to
I do appreciate what
I believe you
yes, what you have explained, but I would like to understand what you mean by blended finance, because I want to see if it's what I understand to be blended finance.
From your statement, you mentioned that even the...
that's a fair question, because there are many different techniques. But the larger the project, here we're looking at especially very large infrastructure type project where no one on its own, no one country can sometimes fully support the project, and you require outsiders, you require international finance. It could be, you know, a blend of development financial institutions.
Thank you.
Absolutely. together with export credit agencies, which have already a different set of rules, and they cannot go below a certain price because it will be perceived to be a subsidy, and this is not the case with it's called consensus rules of the OECD countries. It also opens up the issue of OECD countries supporting Africa versus non-OECD countries that have no rules at all.
We have 20 African countries
China,
are already in the
and DFIs, ECA, so export credit agencies.
And by the way, nuclear energy is different from other sources of energy. You have to go through a series of steps with the atomic energy, the International Atomic Energy, in order to be awarded the possibility
healthy
of
to attract, it has
establishing, a nuclear facility in your
minimum
country.
of
We have 20 countries already
and to be able to do that,
on this
it
path.
has to be a sustainable
There is a nuclear facility in South Africa already.
Commercial sense
Egypt
that can
is
sell
then,
or that
the
can
most advanced in the 20
issues,
I
be
mentioned.
agriculture
but rest assured
or
that
fashion
our countries
or
are not one.
telecom,
We do not
whatever.
leave ourselves
And
behind,
this
so
is
we
really the
Africans are
danger.
supporting
We are
each
very
other.
supportive.
Well, the rest of the world
SACE,
is
the
another
Italian
story. I'm not going to
agency
go into
of
that.
partnerships in
But know
general.
that already concrete
partnership
steps are
is
being
in
taken
the long
in
run
this,
the
in
only
this
way
regard.
to go.
The second thing I want to say, I want to
be
dispel
partnership of equals.
once and for
It
all
cannot be that a big
anyone who
portion
talks
is
about
being
lack of
subsidized and
bankability,
actually
lack of viable
loss-making,
projects,
and the other
there is
part has to
corruption
be,
in Africa, there is this and that. I think
what
the
you
world
call,
today has
dignified
shown
or
us the
sustainable
level of
finance. It
corruption
doesn't work
across the
together
globe.
at all.
And when
There
it
is a
comes to that, the levels
contradiction
of governance in Africa
both in
have been
spirit
improving a lot.
and
when we
in
talk about the
terms of
case by
finance.
case,
It is
then
not
let's talk about case by
feasible.
case. We have stellar examples in Africa
can I
in
respond to
democracy
that?
and good governance
Okay.
and excellent regulation.
I do
So
understand
let's also,
what
as
you have
Africans,
said.
talk about
but I
our
think,
success stories, about the excellent
blended
examples we are
finance
having
can
across the
also,
continent
in
and value
most
them
cases
and
work.
make sure that
If we are
everyone
talking
listens
about
to us.
Africa,
This is how
I
we're
drive
never
women
going to be left
entrepreneurship,
behind.
and
And I
that
think
is why
And it's also
I was
important to
interested
mention
in,
that nuclear
in what
energy
you
is
said.
not very
And I
well
believe in
suited
impact
to the
investing.
size of the grids
or
of
blended
many.
sorry, it's again,
We have seen
we
results
are the small
investing is
modular,
Not commercially
And
which is
this is
not
a new-
commercially
and I
available.
new
work,
and new technologies also
in
emerge
Africa
that can
is
even
priority,
move the
and
reactors
it
that
should
can
be
even move from
prioritized
one
in
village
many
to another.
cases
So there
for
are great
infrastructure,
advancements
which
in that
includes
regard.
Only one
agriculture,
example in the
which
world has
includes
been
health,
commissioned
it includes
yesterday. It's the
education,
first one,
it
and we
includes
don't know the cost.
logistics, it
Everybody's
includes
eager to know how much it costs.
transportation,
One
it
fact for
includes
sure, the facility in South Africa,
so I
among
do
all the
believe in,
nuclear reactors in the world,
blended
is the one that
finance. I
has
do believe
the
in
lowest
impact
capacity factor.
finance,
So
patient
it's
finance
essentially run
for most,
pretty much on an experimental
infrastructure,
basis. So
initiatives.
that's the
And,
current
you make
experience that we
impact
have with
and you make
nuclear,
profit.
and we have the largest, by
I
far,
think we agree
renewable energy
on
potential
the
in the world.
basic
So
feature
there are
on
maybe
the
some other
impact
avenues to
because
look
our
at that are
evaluation
much more accessible and
during
where the
the
value can
diligence
be
phase of
generated
every
a
project,
lot
no
a
matter
lot
what the
better.
sector is, no matter
Do we
which
have,
country
est-ce qu'on
we're
a une
looking at,
question au
is
niveau
always
de
on the
l'audience?
impact side, and for that we use also all 17 SDGs from the Paris agreements,
Oui,
every
un mot
single
là-dessus.
one. So I think in that sense, fully supportive of what you're saying. On the other hand, we are convinced that, good projects have to
merci beaucoup,
turn around a profit, and they cannot be loss-making.
J'ai bien écouté
So if you find a
vos
way through
interventions
blended
avec
finance
les
to do
différents
that,
professeurs
we
et
are more
docteurs
than
ainsi
happy
de suite,
to
chercheurs.
be a partner.
Comme vous savez
If you
déjà,
can
d'abord
not the
à
right
féliciter le Maroc
that
qui a
is
lancé le
really-
95
we
pour
don't have such a big
trouver
distance in that.
la 100% en 2000
I'll just
donc,
like to
et qui a
add,
atteint à 100%
an
en
important element, in my
2019 si j'ai une
opinion,
bonne
is the fact
mémoire.
that we
Et
sometimes
je
need
tiens
to
d'abord à
risk,
préciser que je m'appelle Lassana Traoré. Je suis doctorant au sein de la faculté des sciences de Rabat dans le domaine des énergies renouvelables. Donc, en toute sincérité, c'est un sujet qui est en actualité et j'ai aussi, bien sûr, profité à apprendre quelque chose de nouveau. Donc, en ce qui concerne la question que j'aimerais juste poser, bien sûr, vous avez, je pense que monsieur Jamouni. Monsieur Jamouni, bien sûr, vous avez parlé du Congo-Brazzaville en ce qui concerne, bien sûr, la capacité électrique, énergétique, mais qui a un peu de difficulté pour partager avec les pays frères qui les entourent. Donc, est-ce que, je pense que, est-ce que c'est là aussi, comme vous savez déjà en Afrique, on a plusieurs problèmes. Quand on a une collaboration entre les pays, mais s'il y a malentendu entre ces pays, on coupe tout. Est-ce que cela n'est pas dit à ça aussi, d'une part qui fait peur à certains pays de collaborer avec d'autres afin de partager les ressources ou bien en termes d'énergie? Parce que quand il y a des problèmes entre les deux pays, souvent on arrête beaucoup de choses. Donc,
I'm coming back to you. He was the first one. Please, if you could introduce yourself, and afterward, of course, give us your insights or questions to the panel.
C'est un point très important que vous soulevez par rapport à la crainte de l'interdépendance. Cette interdépendance, comme on l'a vu pour le cas de l'Espagne, peut être aussi très bénéfique. Et je peux prendre un exemple très concret en Afrique, qui est dans la région d'Afrique australe, la SADC, qui est leur communauté économique, qui est organisée aujourd'hui d'un point de vue électrique autour d'un réseau qui s'appelle SAP, pour Southern African Power Pool, qui permet de connecter ou interconnecter 13 pays. C'est probablement le marché électrique le plus intégré, le plus développé du continent. D'autres régions essayent de le répliquer, comme en Afrique de l'Ouest, avec le WAP, ou en Afrique de l'Est avec le IAPI. Mais ce qu'on a vu par exemple l'année dernière ou sur les 2 dernières années, c'est des pays qui étaient historiquement nets exportateurs sur ce marché SAC, comme la Zambie, grâce à ses capacités hydroélectriques, est devenue rapidement, on l'espère temporairement, importatrice, parce que ses capacités hydroélectriques étaient fortement affectées par la sécheresse. Et là, des pays comme le Mozambique, comme l'Afrique du Sud également, ont commencé à soutenir et aider la Zambie en supportant et en exportant de l'électricité sur la Zambie. Donc cette interdépendance, à mon sens, est aussi une opportunité, devrait également rassurer les autorités des pays africains par rapport aux bénéfices qu'elles peuvent en tirer, plutôt que par rapport aux craintes qu'il peut y avoir. Il y a toujours des risques, mais au contraire, on a bien vu que ce matin dans un panel, on parlait du démarrage de l'Union européenne, qui était une union du fer et de l'acier. On a voulu créer une dépendance, une intégration continentale par des besoins communs qui étaient ceux de l'acier et du charbon pour l'énergie et la reconstruction. Alors pourquoi l'Afrique ne fait pas la même chose? Pourquoi ne pas intégrer le continent, en tout cas les sous-régions du continent, par des besoins communs et notamment l'énergie?
So, them deserving getting a concessionary is deserving for them to have a normal. So, at concessionary rates, you get 1%, 2% rates. There are other institutions that are borrowing at that level. So, it's rigged again, so it needs to be counted. Second, although the numbers are relatively slow, but ODA or donor contribution is an exhibition of solidarity between countries. And if the world finds itself where it's cutting cash in solidarity, what next? So it has a role beyond the cash. It has a role beyond. It's your personal relationship. If you're supporting somebody and you cut up the cash, what else would you cut? Thirdly, beyond borrowing, the developed countries, so-called donor countries, they use aid and they use blended finance in their countries. In the United Kingdom where I live, and it's true in many European countries, the government gives grants and aid, dollar for dollar, euro for euro, more to private commercial businesses than charities through tax reliefs and subsidies. And
then if you come to development country, they say, oh, we can't give it to you because it upsets it. It doesn't work like that. We all remember the so-called big debt forgiveness of 2005. UK had the honor to announce it. It was the then Chancellor Gordon Brown, who later became Prime Minister. The day he announced it, I think it was 9th of June of 2005. I was one of the 11 people sitting on number 11 Downing Street. He went out to announce it, wiping billions of dollars with Trevor Manuel, who was the finance minister of South Africa at the time. Why did we have to do that? Because those debts were structured wrongly against the African government. So we called it forgiveness, but actually it was just redressing the injustice. So I think we need to be careful with Trump's movement. Almost everything Trump's doing in this, not only is it wrong on the economics, it's wrong on the humanity.
Thank you very much for this brilliant intervention and for your insights. Maybe I will let Innocent answer your question, but thank you very much once again.
Thank you very much. Your question is actually a very important one because of for a good number of companies we work in, it's certainly it could have an impact on them. One, when you look at remittances, the United States is a significant source of flow of remittances to Africa, and not just Africa. If you look at Mexico, if you look at India, close to $100 billion, over $100 billion remittances every year. And so, this $100 billion has a significant impact on lives and livelihoods in the region and across the countries where it plays a significant role. Close to 20% of that GDP is dependent on remittances. And so when we looked at it, for example, if you put a 5% tax, that amounts to about $5 billion, right? And if you look at the current cost of remittance flows, I think it's roughly about 8%. So you're going to have like an effective rate of 13%. If you do that, what you're going to end up seeing is that you're going to push flows into informal channels, which are, you know, very unsafe. That is outweigh the benefits. So that's part of the argument we're trying to make. And so hoping to see how, you know, as events unfold, how, what to come out from the US Senate in particular. Thank you.
Yes, please, if you could also introduce yourself and then, of course, your comments or questions.
Okay, thank you. This is Younes Al-Qandousi. I'm from the private sector. I'm a consultant working with a lot of companies. I understand some challenges, so I'm not an expert. Some of the challenges. I just have some questions for each of the one of the panelists. The first one is for Madame Ocean. So you mentioned transparency and in contracts and procurement, which is very important. But I think the biggest challenge is we struggle in Africa to implement governance and some type of risk management. Because if we have strong governance and we have checks and balances everywhere, everybody will come to us and invest with us in whatever we do, because they know there is transparency through governance. We have independent, for example, in Morocco, we have La Cour des Comptes. It's the body who is auditing the finances of every public administration. So if we have this kind of governance and we know that there is checks and balances, I think that assures enough transparency for everybody to come and invest in Morocco. For Madame Ron, I understood that you are not financing directly, but you are giving guarantees and credit guarantees. Are you planning to work with local banks also to make sure that also, because we have a lot of challenges in financing SMEs, basically of those guarantee requirements. I'm an SME, I'm willing to export or to import, so I need some guarantees to get the finance. Is that something you are working on? And Mr. Iseche, sorry. You mentioned high cost of transfers, which is remittances. I think we have to move from the old remittance system and go to blockchain systems, which are more effective, more secure, and less costly for our finances. Africa is now having a lot of innovation. I can see a lot of African countries going into digital payments very much faster than European countries, and they are in fact, disruptors in that way. So maybe we have to work as governments, banks, public institutions to implement this kind of new technology, which is blockchain remittances. It will reduce a lot of cost and it's very secure. I think, yes, Mr. Da Silva. You mentioned AI, but I think AI is a little bit early to adopt, specifically in public sector, because it needs a lot of rules and a lot of governance around it, a lot of risk management. Maybe for the private sector, because they are willing to do, they can implement their own risk management systems and their own. But for the public sector, I think there should be laws implemented first, regulation first, before going into adopting AI in public sector. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks.
You mentioned, you talked about digital payments. The truth is that a lot has happened in the space, right? Remember, back then you had brick and mortar stores, Western Union, where you go to gas stations to send funds. But now, most of it, you're seeing rapid adoption of digital channels in terms of sending remittance flows. When it comes, what we're also seeing in the space is, greater use of stable coins, right? Which tend to be cheaper, right? In terms of enabling remittance flows. That's one area that we're beginning to see growing adoption. Now, the only challenge you have sometimes is really about the regulatory frameworks in the recipient countries, right? Where you have countries having built the regulatory frameworks to properly regulate, the use of stable coins. I think that's one thing that has sort of slowed down, greater uptake of it, particularly through conventional systems like the banks, because ultimately you have to, if you use a stable coin, you have to what you call an off-ramp. You need to move it into, fiat currency to be able to utilize the funds. So that's one area that we're, gradually see some countries are beginning to build frameworks. I think we're seeing that in Kenya, Nigeria does, Morocco. Nigeria is also, they just passed the bill in Parliament, which was signed by the President a month ago. And you're gradually seeing some sort of evolution in the regulation of digital assets. I think that will ultimately help to enable greater use of call it digital payments or tools like stable coins in general. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for the question. I think I remember two elements of it. Correct me if I'm wrong. You mentioned risk management and you mentioned the SMEs. So I will start with the risk management end that, is extremely important for us because very much alike the name of this conference, actually, we have developed last year what we call the GROW effect. It's a new mechanism. We're focusing on an integrated system, also algorithms, that the G of GROW stands for effectively guarantees and liquidity, and then we have the R, which is all about risk management because we support companies, but let's start with the Italian companies on both the traditional risks but also new type of risks. So anything from credit and political risk that has been going on for many years, but also new emerging risks like those related to climate change or catastrophe. Now getting to the SMEs. We certainly support SMEs. We have to, by definition, the Italian economy is at 97% of SMEs. Same. The only thing is that we're doing it through these umbrella facilities. I mentioned before the push facility. But the push facility provides we arrange also for the financing, because we attract the banks that then create like a club with. And the banks could be both international banks but also local banks. We're very happy with local banks, and we've done it before in the Middle East, in Latin America, in Central America, in Saudi Arabia. Why we involve the local banks? Because it's a medium long-term finance and they have a vested interest. It's actually in the benefit of everyone to have skin in the game. The SMEs issue is, however, a little bit more complicated than that, because we're supporting our SMEs by selecting the top-tier conglomerates or ministries of finance in countries such as Morocco, to whom we're providing the finance through our guarantee. We're taking away all the issues you don't sleep during the night, because we're taking that risk of non-payment of everything. However, we're doing it to introduce our SMEs to these buyers. I'm being very blunt, because this is really what we do. We, on our own, if you want, it's our responsibility. We have a dedicated team. We create matchmaking events. That's why we call it push. We push over the whole supply chain. These SMEs would have no chance to meet companies such as, OCP in Morocco or others. They will have no access to that and no access to the one specific fragment of finance. But through this push facility, which is, I didn't mention before, it's on a best effort basis. So the buyer gets the full amount. If they want, immediately they can draw down for general purpose. They can refurbish their headquarters. We don't care. But they must welcome the presence of the companies we bring, largely SMEs, to these matchmaking events. And then transparency rules. It's procurement people meeting procurement people without any legal obligation. Since we are absolutely certain that our SMEs bring value added and impact favorably the local economy, those who get onto the vendors list and then have, of course, the right pricing and above all the right technology are going to gain. This is how we support the SMEs. What you're talking about, I think, is more the supplier's credit. It's the project by project by project, or these small projects that admittedly for an export credit agency is very difficult to do in a foreign land. If we try to support SMEs in your country, it's almost mission impossible. I want to be very clear, because we don't have the local know-how you have about these companies. We don't hear the rumors through the grapevine about financial difficulties. We only get, up to a certain amount of financial documents, or obviously balance sheets, but management accounts. But we don't have the hand on the pulse, so we cannot work directly with foreign SMEs, by definition. But for our SMEs, we make sure we push them into the arena of the best companies in each country. These are the opportunities. And that's really where, this very innovative thriving, because it's largely supporting SMEs.
Small, please. Yes.
It's very interesting, I know that you are doing the best for your local SMEs, but I think also you have to think of Morocco as a growing country, and it needs some transfer of know-how and technology. So we welcome SMEs from everywhere in the world, as long as they also make sure they transfer the know-how and technology to our Moroccan country, so we can also make things by ourselves also. Thank you.
This transfer of know-how actually takes place through these meetings, and we love to see that a company that maybe counts no more than 10 or 20 people can bring, really the top technology today possible, be it, equipment for this sector or for that sector. but it's not really a size thing, you know, it's the best advanced technology, and that is really what we love doing.
Well, on the AI, on the AI question that you request, I think we should also see it from a efficiency and also from a challenges perspective. But when you look at what we can achieve in terms of efficiency, in terms of improved service delivery, because we know that we face huge challenges in service delivery. Let's say when you're doing civil registration, tax filing, permit issuance, and even, and we saw examples like in Rwanda where the government has implemented a chat box, 24-hour working one. It helped to provide services in a much high standards and quality. And of course, it's also very difficult, in my opinion, to bring, let's say, legal frameworks into something that has never yet been perceived as such. So you can, otherwise you will be framing without having the right experience or the right feeling on how it works from our perspective. And of course we have challenges in regards to the infrastructure that needs to be deployed, the literacy of people that needs to manage with those, but regardless to that, there are much more advantages for Africa in terms of what kind of volume of data that we can actually process with AI compared to a traditional one. Bureaucracy is a very big and present challenge. And with bureaucracy, we also have the issues with corruption. So you are able to streamline much better with access of such tools and true optimization of
need for greater policy clarity. The private sector thrives on predictability. We know that. So there is need for them to understand and trust government policies for investments into infrastructure, because we are talking about a huge investment. Infrastructure is huge investment, and that's why we are talking about PPPs, private-public partnerships, because governments are not able to do it alone. So, but then the private sector needs to make sure that they can make profit out of their investments, and that's why it's something that requires, greater collaboration between the private and the public sector, and good policy frameworks that can safeguard
Ladies and gentlemen,
the profit of the private sector and then provide them
Excellencies, honorable guests and participants, I am delighted to moderate this panel with very distinguished guests. We will tackle a very important issue, which is related to what is going on actually in the world.
But also to have been able to be very action-oriented, very concrete, and also very diverse. And that is something that is really appreciated, talking about partnerships, to see people in this panel that have really brought their own experience, their own vision, and their own learning also from the ground. And thank you very much for this very, very enriching and rich discussion. I am sure that people who are with us and who will be watching also your contribution, because it's really widespread in Morocco, including universities, will be learning a lot and taking into account every recommendation and resolution you have made. Thank you so much once again. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and above all, as a local, I hope you will enjoy your stay in Morocco.
Geopolitical shifts in the world, and how shall nations,
for the rest of the day,
trading blocs and existing alliances reshape their thinking and adapt to this new shifting context? This is a question I will ask to my panelists, and I would be interested to hear about different perspectives, how different, especially